President Trump is urging Iran to make a deal with the U.S. regarding its nuclear program before nothing is left. It comes after a series of attacks by Israel targeting top Iranian officials and military facilities. Trump says additional attacks are planned and that they will be even more brutal. White House reporter Alex Gangitano joins us to discuss. Hey, Alex, what is the latest from the White House?
Yeah, as you mentioned, we heard from Trump on Truth Social earlier today, telling Iran, make a deal or that you will face lethal consequences. We also heard from Secretary of State Marco Rubio right after those strikes on Thursday night here in D.C., insisting that the U.S. was not involved with any of this. And since then, the president has spoken to some news outlets, and he has praised the strikes, actually touted that some U.S. equipment was used in some of these, saying that they'd been excellent, but also insisting again that Iran come back to the negotiating table and work on these nuclear talks.
What's on Trump's agenda for today? Will he be meeting with national security officials, and are there any public events planned where he might be asked questions by members of the press?
Yeah, as of right now, there's actually nothing public on the president's schedule other than the fact that we know he'll be meeting with his nuclear team and speaking in the Situation Room with them. If then something public gets added to the schedule, the president would be in a position to take questions from the press. Of course, we have a lot of questions here over, his interactions with Prime Minister Netanyahu and what they knew about these strikes ahead of time. So we'll have to see what else he could be adding. But he is in talks right now with his nuclear team, with his national security team.
Yeah, obviously Trump had been signaling that there were precautions being taken, especially regarding U.S. military personnel stationed in the region. But at this moment, are there fears of retaliation? We have heard from the Iranian leadership that, they would be retaliating for these attacks.
Yeah, I think that's in part why we saw Trump so adamant on Truth Social earlier today, saying, come to the table, no more deaths, no more destruction, do it before it's too late, trying to kind of calm things down in the region, and also why the U.S. was distancing themselves so much immediately from the situation on the ground. The fact that Rubio came out and insisted right away that the U.S. was not involved. I think those are all in an effort to avoid any kind of escalation of this.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that the first words from the White House carried that message that this was unilateral action by Israel and that Iran should not target the U.S. with retaliation. Surely, though the U.S. knew this was about to happen, there has been some suggestion that the attack was carried out, against Trump's wishes. Is there any truth to that?
Yeah, Trump actually told Fox News on Thursday evening that he was aware that the Israeli strikes were going to happen before they did. But it's interesting to note, just hours before these strikes happened, he had cautioned publicly while speaking to reporters that an Israeli strike on any of Iranian nuclear sites, military sites, would threaten the U.S. talks with Iran. So he did kind of set off this caution, and Israel went ahead with these strikes.
Is there any indication of what, from the president's point of view, would draw the U.S. military into this situation? Is that based on how Iran retaliates? Obviously, Israel is a close ally of the United States and has some responsibility, one would think, to protect Israel in the case of a military conflict.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of what they're trying to mull over today is at what point does involvement become more than just some phone calls between Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump? But again, you and I talked about how much the administration was adamant that they want to distance themselves from this situation. But then we did find out that Trump himself was aware of this ahead of time. So kind of interesting questions there over involvement and if the administration, how supportive they want to be of Israel here.
There were supposed to be direct negotiations between the U.S. and Iran in Oman on Sunday. Those are apparently now off. What's the administration saying about the prospects of continuing these negotiations, and is the Iranian leadership in any mood to participate?
Yeah, it's interesting. The president has appeared optimistic today about being able to come back to the negotiating table with Iran, and of course insisting, as he has for months, that the country cannot obtain a nuclear weapon. He actually told NBC News earlier today that Iran may have another opportunity to make a deal over its nuclear program, but he indicated that a lot of the Iranians who he was working with previously, now some of them are dead after those strikes.
Well, the eyes of the world are certainly focused on that White House right behind you, so we really appreciate this insight that you've been able to provide. We'll continue to follow this developing story, but for now, we'll leave it at that. Alex Gangitano, thanks so much.
Thanks, Joe.